So this book that you've written, K-pop: The Odyssey, fantastic book. I really enjoy it, particularly because it looks at English language sources, Korean language sources. It explains things so well, and you look at K-pop through three different perspectives: as a genre, as an industry, as a culture, much more. Let's start by moving through some of those, Usok. K-pop as a genre. What are some of the arguments for or against? What's your personal take on this? Is it a question we can answer? Is K-pop a genre?
Oh man. And the funny thing about this topic is that this was a topic I couldn't figure out how to adequately answer until the very end of the book writing process. And that's
Mm,
funny because these are the first three chapters in the book, and it took me probably the last like couple of moments to finish it. Short answer is that I think, and it took a lot of discussions with people, just like Professor Lee, who was also on the show.
mm,
The shorter answer is that personally, I see it as a cultural phenomenon that involves much more than the music itself. How I try to explain it to like a layperson,
mm,
and also I think my role in K-pop, I kind of see myself as a facilitator. Like I don't call myself an expert. I see like I try to break things down for the lay people, and how I explain it to people is that I see it as like a triangle. There's like three components, like a triumvirate. We have the artist and the music,
mm,
which is one component. The second is the company, which is the industry system,
mm,
or vice versa. And then we have the culture that is shaped in large part by the fandoms. So we have artist, company, and fandom in that triangle. So when we talk about K-pop in a legitimate discussion, I think that we have to talk about all three. That's why when we talk about just the artist and the music, there's a lot more that we have to dissect. So to talk about the arguments against is K-pop a genre thing
mm.
within this umbrella term, I think there's so many different sounds, right? Like if you look at one artist's like discography, there's so many different sounds,
Yeah.
genres, influences, and multiple songwriters come together to write one song.
Mm,
Even though an idol group, like primarily they may do like dance-based pop sounds, we do see a variety of influences, right?
yeah.
But the argument for K-pop as a genre, which I do see, I think that when a lot of people talk about K-pop, it's usually pretty clear what they're referring to. I think K-pop is often also used synonymously when talking about other genres. When we're talking about like hip hop, J-pop, dance pop, and K-pop, right?
Mm,
So there
mm.
is this sort of ease of categorization factor, I think, especially in the context of like music award ceremonies, just like the MTV Video Music Awards, like best K-pop category. So something like for like that categorization aspect of it, in my opinion.
Mm. Does does that, when you mention these award shows and things like that, does the category of K-pop then limit it because it allows, these big award shows and these things to just put all the Korean stuff under one umbrella without bringing it into the mainstream? So it's not just, best pop or best artist, but it's like best Korean artist. It's always kind of othering. I know David Bryan of the Talking Heads wrote a good piece about that on World Music. Does K-pop need to transcend the term K-pop in that sense?
So yeah, in the book, I tackled this issue. I think referring back to that 2019 era, 2019 MTV Video Music Awards. And for those of you listening, so this was they first created a separate best K-pop category for the first time, and they did
Mm,
not include BTS, their single "Boys with Love," which was actually a pretty big hit that year. They didn't include BTS in any of the major categories, and I think a similar this sort of line of reasoning is similar to how we don't really refer to world music as such anymore. Like the
right.
ways certain cultural and musical forms are depicted as exotic foreign by this sort of western central gaze, when in fact these types of musical and cultural forms haven't existed for a long time elsewhere. So that was, I think, a lot of the K-pop fans and myself included, like that was our gripe. It's like, where did this like best K-pop category come from? Like you knew K-pop was a thing this whole time. Now
Mm,
you want to capitalize on it, but instead of nominating these artists on any other category, you lump them into all one. Fast
mm.
forward to 2022, obviously BTS is Grammys are actually this weekend or tomorrow. Obviously BTS is nominated for I believe best pop group, best group performance in the pop category,
Mm.
but they're still not nominated for like record of the year, song of the year, artist of the year, something like that. So they did sweep the awards at American Music Awards, but so I think there's a little bit of progress to be made on that point.
Yeah.
Will they continue with this best K-pop category, at least in the MTV Video Music Awards context? I think they will.
Mm.
They are going to probably try to capitalize on this, like, because K-pop is now a term that at least like people have heard about. But I hope that, at least if we're gonna do this, like let's do this right and continue to bring up these discussions about othering and this like
Mm.
exoticness that, continue to persist under this Western cultural gaze.
Sure. When we talk about like world music and things, Usop, that, and we don't really use that category anymore. That music, to me, when it was kind of fundamentally different from what we did here. So I wonder if we actually look at the music, and you've already said that artists will go through a variety of different genres in their stuff. Like musically, is K-pop actually that different from Western music, from mainstream pop, wherever it comes from?
I think nowadays, what's interesting is that not just K-pop, but any sort of mainstream pop songs, to produce one pop song involves multiple songwriters and top liners
Mm.
working on the track from all over the globe. So I think that personally, I really think people who don't really know about K-pop and tend to, view it under a certain frame, they should really see past that K-pop label and listen to some tracks, especially the B-sides, because people may think that K-pop may not be for everyone, but there is something for all to enjoy. I think there's a lot of creative minds working on one track.
Mm.
And I'm also a believer that good music tends to transcend boundaries and borders. That's why I really like seeing this kind of like the Korean word 역주행 syndrome on the Korean streaming services when a
Mm.
song floats to the top by word of mouth because it's so good.
Mm.
So we've seen a couple of examples of that lately. So hopefully we see that a lot more in a worldwide context and people discover, hey, like K-pop's actually pretty dope. So yeah.
Yeah, I listen to music primarily. That's how I approach these things. Not so much with the music videos or the status of the idols, things like that. For me, it's a good song or it's not a good song. I like it or I don't. Are there any particular songs, Usop? Like you mentioned these certain songs rising to the top, or some people might not getting into K-pop because they don't know what the dope songs are. Like, what are these dope songs? What are the B-sides? What are people sleeping on?
Sleeping on, first of all, I think streaming services have done a great job of making these playlists like, oh, like top 100 K-pop or like Melon top 100. So now
Mm.
people, it's a lot easier. There's a better accessibility than ever before. Same with the YouTube, all these platforms, and like songs are trending on TikTok all the time, which is another
Yeah.
means of access. Personally, personally, what I've been listening to, top of the charts right now, I've been listening to a lot of female artists like G Idol and Red Velvet's new albums. Even
Mm-hmm.
their B-sides are phenomenal on this album, very well produced. But on a daily basis, I also listen to a lot of idol artists. Like I listen to Korean hip hop a lot, actually. A rapper
Mm-hmm.
named Bloo. Bloo had an album last year. I think he's really great. There's also a rap trio called Homies, a little bit more underground, but I like to kind of call them the Korean Migos a little bit, but
Mm.
with a very Korean flair. But yeah, and one last but not least, there's a singer named Ahn Ye-Eun.
Mm-hmm.
She blends traditional pansori sounds in a very unique way, and I think that's why I think there's all these like phenomenal Korean artists, and to really lump them under this like giant K-pop category, I think there's a lot more to that discussion.
Sure. My nephew is really into homies at the moment. So can you just tell, like, just so I can be a cool uncle for him or something, like, can you give me a little bit on Korean hip hop, either on homies or any other artists? Like, just how do you hear it? What is it? I mean, because it's different from West Coast hip hop or modern,
Oh man,
yeah, go into it for us, Usop.
it's interesting because I think last week I actually got to see Epik High, and
Nice, nice.
I've been following Epik High since for about 15 years since middle school,
Mm.
and there was a time period I thought like, hey, like why isn't Epik High, like why are they so consistent? Like their songs didn't really sound experimental to me. But then at a certain point, I realized like this is what makes Epik High. This is a type of hip hop that they created in Korea, and a lot
Mm.
of artists like look up to them. I think the current batch of like, kind of like the hip, the fresh artists like Justthis, Scary Boy,
Mm.
Lil Boy. There's a lot of different sounds being. I think there was a phase where singing rap was a thing, and then a lot of people call that out and like,
Mm.
is this really hip hop or not? That's why I think Homies was a little bit fresh for a lot of people because they really bring this like sort of American trap sound. A lot of Koreans would say ponpo,
Mm-hmm.
but while
Mm-hmm.
still maintaining that kind of there's like a Koreanness to this like American trap sound. So I think the artists that do that very great, like take obviously American hip hop is Black culture, but
Mm.
you can experiment on it, put a little bit of spice and flair onto it, make it a little bit Korean, and I
Mm.
think that's something like Korean hip hop has to offer for everyone actually around the world.
How does Epik High and Korean hip hop go down in New York or in the United States? Because we hear a lot about K-pop, and you know, K-pop's pretty, for the most part, it's pretty like middle class. It's easy to access. It's not too much in your face. You can watch it with your young kids or your grandmother. What's the response with Korean hip hop?
I think Epik High is also Epik High is a little bit different, obviously, because you have Tablo as a front man who speaks English fluently. If I compare my Epik High concert experience in both in New York, but compare my Epik High concert experience to Twice earlier this month, also in New York, very different vibes. I guess it's like K-pop versus Korean hip hop. It's a little bit, I don't know how to describe it, but at least for Epik High, I see that a lot of fans have been following them for at least a couple of years. Because a lot of their hits go back to maybe like when I was in middle school, back in like 2007 or something, and people are still chanting along. Maybe they picked it up recently, but I also saw a lot of diversity in actually both Twice and Epik High concerts. So maybe this is a good thing generally for Korean music or Korean artists that are touring abroad. We see diversity more so than ever before. People that don't even look like me. If I were to go to a tour of a Korean artist maybe like 10 years ago, I guarantee it would have been mostly East Asians, but today it's a little bit of a different discussion.
Nice. I followed Tablo on Twitter, and I saw pictures of the concerts, things like that. It looks great, man. Yeah, it's good stuff. He's very cool on there. Tell me about Twice then. I didn't know you'd seen Twice. What was the Twice concert like in New York?
Goodness. Twice. Somehow I ended up getting box seats for that concert. Nice. I do think that for a concert of that caliber of like a top idol group, I do think I need to be in the standing section next time to see them a little bit up close. I think, and my experience with Twice is that obviously, like I saw them debut. I was more of a Closeters fan. I was like fanboying by myself at home, usually just listening to them. But this was the first time I went to an actual Twice concert, and I went full out with my fanboy mode. I sang along to all the songs. And I realized it is a very different experience if going to an actual concert and singing along this K-pop idol tour in a foreign country. I do think that if I were in Korean, the band chants would have been kind of louder, but I do think that there is something about the Korean lyrics that non-Korean fans have to put in a little bit of effort to learn it. So that's an interesting distinction. I realized, hey, like the fans that are here are making a lot of effort because obviously a lot of Twice's lyrics are in Korean, which means that the fans have to put in the effort to maybe try, if they really want to engage with the music, they want to to understand the lyrics a little bit.
Right.
So that's something that went in my head as I was chanting the chorus of every single song that was going on.
You're not allowed to sing or chant here at the moment still because of COVID. Yeah, like at the baseball games and things like that, and at the concerts, right? They're doing that. You mentioned, Wooseok, this idea that 10 years ago, if you went to one of these concerts, it would primarily be East Asian people. So, but now it's much more diverse, and you see a wide range of people. So I wonder if I can respectfully try to touch on this issue of like cultural representation or being able to see yourself. So obviously this is a different experience for you and for me. And so what does that mean, for example, for you, for other Korean people, for East Asian people around the world, I guess, when they start seeing themselves represented in the Grammys or mainstream media, or when they don't see themselves? What has that experience been like?
Yeah, so I think I talk about this in the book, where my experience is that so I came to the United States in second grade not knowing this language. I was like kind of thrown to the wolves into the wilderness. And one day I turned on MTV. Obviously I was so used to watching Korean television and listening to Korean music of like early 2000s. I come here, I turn on MTV, there's like Justin Timberlake, Kanye West, all these like cool productions. Like the scale is not like Korea at all. It's so big. And then I realized, okay, well, where's like the Asian guy or Asian diva or something? There's no Asians on the entire program, no Asian artists, first of all, on the entire programming, no like Asian host or someone giving out the awards. And I realized that this was around like fourth grade. And I'm like, man, maybe like it would be cool if I did see like a star up there, like how I saw back in Korea. Like if I turn on the TV in Korea, I saw people like Shinhwa, Lee Jong-hyun, like back when I was a little kid. And now like I'm here in a new country with all these like cool artists, but hey, like it would be kind of cool because I still don't know the language well enough. Even at school, like I feel like a very new kid. So that's like a thought I had back then. And through an array of events, like fast forwarding after when the term K-pop started being thrown around internationally I got to at least, so out of some serendipity, I think I got to witness the development of K-pop in both Korea and the US.
Mm.
Personally, for me, 2012 was when I went to college to California. Coincidentally, that's when Gangnam Style blew up. And I think that's when I realized, okay, something very interesting is happening with this Asian Korean pop cultural phenomenon. But I don't know why this is happening, but I would love to see it happen more. And I think that was 10 years. That was exactly 10 years ago now. So because that was 2012. So yeah, what a far away we've come. There's more progress to be made, but I think this topic of Asian representation in the media now is like one of the most interesting times ever so far.
On that sense, Wooseok, do you think that K-pop is getting better, or do you think the idea of representation and diversity in the West is getting more open and accessible?
I think it's a synergy of both. I think, first of all, the younger generation, millennial and Gen Z generations, definitely a little bit more on the progressive side with the generations that grow up with social media, where we have I'm sorry, I'm like, why am I tripping here? We have available so many different resources and information that we may not request, obviously, on social media.
Yeah.
But I think it's an interesting time where people really gather and share different ideas. People argue, people debate, people agree. And the world is, at least like, there's a lot of people that are actually pushing for some diversity and cultural shift. Not just in the Western world, but I guess even in Korea, I think there is like the younger generations try to make a movement towards that as well. Couple that, at least in the Western world, now we have like a cultural shift where now diversity is, there's a lot more diversity in pop culture more than ever before.
Right.
Differences are actually celebrated. And now and in the end, now people have more entertainment and culture to enjoy. Like, because a lot of people that didn't know about K-pop in the past now like can, celebrate and be entertained by all these like cool artists around the world, and that they've been missing out on this whole time. And whereas I'm just like, hey, like I've been trying to tell you, these are some of the artists like I've been listening to. I don't know why you found out about this now. For example, like Epik High has been around forever, but at least you found out now. It's great. Same with BTS. BTS has been grinding since 2013, but at least you found out. So what an interesting time. Now I think it's great that people are a lot more open-minded to consuming this kind of cultural, pop cultural content.
Yeah, I think that synergy is really important. It takes both factors. As well as the genre, Wooseok, you also talk so much great stuff in your book about the industry and how that plays out. Like, if you look at the K-pop industry, it's obviously so successful. I think it's really important just to stress how, globally popular Hallyu and K-pop is. I get international students coming to my classes from all over the world, and they're into this stuff. So a lot of it is working. What do you make of the industry? What are the main features? What are its strengths? What are its challenges?
Yes, and I think this was something I was always like fascinated by, and I think this is something also I had to interview a lot of people in it because I'm not working in the industry but directly myself, whether they were a trainee, whether they're in marketing, or whether they're on the music side. And by the end of talking with, first of all, these generous people that made time for me, we definitely realized that simplifying this grand cultural phenomenon in industry to mere idol dance pop would be a huge understatement for how many human resources are involved in this, in creating something, great and magical like this, how much work, effort, and time people spend in their respective positions. And I think some people need to also, like fans also sometimes needs to realize that people that work in the industry are just, it's a job. Like it's just like for a lot of people, it's like a 9 to 6 p.m. job. They got, or maybe they work overtime all the time. But, it's like, for some people it's a livelihood, some people it's a job, but in the end, all this culminates into what you consume and what you see on TV and the music that you listen to. So I think that goes kind of back to the aforementioned triangle that I mentioned earlier about this like industry and the company that forms this like one end of this triangle. K-pop industry, though, I think obviously when we talk about the industry with this form of a 360 contract deal, it's been long criticized for its practices. Couple that now with like how much money is being made from streaming versus concerts, endorsements, live events, etc. There's a lot of topics within the industry that often get shown in a bad light. But I think discussions like this need to be kind of balanced out. What can we improve? What can we what have we achieved so far for the like the next generation of artists and fans, like what can we expect to see better?
What would you like to see better, like with the industry or with the commentary on it, or how does it go forward? Because just from my perspective, the industry works really well, and it does achieve all these things. It does seem to be sort of reflective of wider Korean culture a little bit. You know, there is this sort of top down, very unified. You sort of dedicate yourself to the company. What's your take on the industry going forward? Can it survive? Will it survive? Will it have to change at all?
I think a lot of this industry, because, and look how kind of like how I mentioned, for a lot of people this is a job, and any Korean company is a more of a hierarchical structure, and that's because the society works in a more hierarchical way than its Western counterparts. We see less autonomy from a new idol artist per se. Like I use Idol Group as an example. There's obviously a certain trajectory they have to take. The company, which is the label and agency combined, this company system guides their entire career for a few years, and maybe once there's like a breakthrough, then they can maybe get their cell phones back and have a little bit more autonomy. But that that's why there is like an established culture and protocol they go through, and it works. That's why it continues to be in place. But one change I do like seeing right now is the influx of talented, at least we're talking in the K-pop idol context, the influx of talented idols that write their own songs from the onset. So groups like Stray Kids and G-Idol, they debuted with like self-written songs. And I think for the company to take a chance on something like that shows that, hey, like you actually gave these people, like, you actually respected the artist's creative work well enough to really count on them on this huge grand debut. So that's like a trend I would love to see continue going forward. So like, hey, like these idols are obviously talented, give them a little bit more, creative control. Like let's let them make the choreography, make these kind of decisions. Obviously the company is going to know better in terms of management and whatnot, but what the artists do best are they're entertainers. Like let them entertain us with their creativity and talent. So that's one kind of a trend I do like seeing.
I think the fans want that as well. I think in the current day we want authenticity. We want to see that personal expression. That's really important. While we're on entertainment and the entertainment agencies, the companies, so we have Big Hit, which is now Hybe. Do you think that they've challenged the status quo, the established three? Did they come in and did they sort of cause a revolution, or did they more like reaffirmed the status quo and they just now it's the big four without any too much structural change? What do you think Hybe, Big Hit have done in that sense?
It's interesting because as I was writing, so I wrote my manuscript in 2020, and Hybe didn't rebrand until I think either right after the book was out or around that period. I think that's when the restructuring and stuff was going on. So in the book, I wish that happened a little later so I could devote a little bit more of the book to Big Hit and Hybe.
Yeah.
But I think it's really interesting because Hybe has become like a company that's now discussed in the same lengths with like Kakao and Samsung rather than like a typical entertainment company. But at the same time, I don't think that should put down the other companies at all, because the other companies like have been around for a while and they've had a proven success record, and with like an array of talented roster of successful artists over the years that really shaped this global K-pop culture. What I find interesting with Hybe and the rest, and also the other big three companies, is that now these companies are engaging in strategic partnerships with each other. Hybe's fandom platform Weverse initially was created just for the big hit artists like BTS and TXT, but now they invite other artists from other companies as well, and that makes me wonder and think. And Hybe also acquired VLive. So VLive is under there as well. So now it makes me wonder, hey, like what if like instead of, yes, I'm a believer that competition fosters innovation, but at the same time, hey, like these strategic partnerships may be really fruitful for the culture and the business as a whole. Like we'll get even better, programming, better content and IP, artists, talent. Maybe you can actually uplift the artists in a way that we've never seen before on a global international scale. So that's something I like seeing, and I think it's super interesting. And with the direction there that all four of these companies are going with this whole blockchain stuff, now there's, I think, more to anticipate. I know a lot of the fans are concerned because they don't know what's going to happen, but that's the nature of showbiz. Like entertainment and technology change so fast. So
yeah, Bob Dylan picks up an electric guitar, people start scratching on, you know, turntables, and the game's changed. Before we get into those platforms, Wooseok, like Weverse and things, let's just talk a little bit about the idols. I think, you know, what is a K-pop idol? Is a K-pop idol synonymous with a pop star? In a broader pop star in Korea, or a global pop star? Is an idol a thing unto itself that makes them a little bit different? How do you see these kind of K-pop idols?
Yeah, I think so. So when we obviously refer to a K-pop idol, we're usually referring to a very specific type of artist, at least like for a person who has been engaging with the K-pop culture. It's a very specific type of artist that engages in certain practices, like, you know, glamorous, showy performances, or styled in a certain way. Often there's dance choreography. What's also interesting that we make these arbitrary distinctions like idol rock bands or idol rappers. Nonetheless, you know, there's obviously a specific fandom culture. I also thought it was kind of interesting, like we consider certain artists as ex-idol if they've been pursuing a different trajectory afterwards. So like someone like Jay Park, we call him he's a ex-idol, now hip-hop R&B musician. But that makes me wonder, like, idol and hip-hop R&B musician, do the two things have to be mutually exclusive? When does someone naturally graduate from this idol title? People don't really refer to like Kim Tae-woo from God as an active idol. He's a father of kids. He does ballads usually. So it's kind of interesting. I kind of wish the term word idol can be used a little bit more literally, so that it's someone we idolize. But now it's kind of like a classification term for someone like in that, you know, K-pop idol pop star space. You know, just because they're an idol group doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to idolize them. Like if I meet, you know, last week somehow out of some serendipity, I got to meet Tabo, and I would consider him my idol, but he's far from an idol, K-pop idol, right? And to wrap up on this discussion, I think word pop star, I think is also interesting because rapper Drake released a song called Pop Star, and this talks about how he's like a pop culture icon. But if we take the term, how are you gonna, you know, interpret the word pop? Are you talking about that he makes popular music? Is pop in K-pop popular, or is what kind of pop does it refer to? So these are all these like discussions in my head as I was trying to formulate that is K-pop a genre set of chapters in the end, and that's what boggled my mind so much.
Yeah, no, I get what you're saying about Drake and Tableau as well. Maybe Freud would have some weird things to say about where I'll go with this, but like one of the things that I think is that if you're a pop star, if you're Drake, if you're Adele or something like that, yeah, then you also have relationships and you live a life and things like that. One of the things that I sort of see with idols is that they don't, you know, they're incredibly attractive, beautiful, young, at the peak of their physical performance, but yet often remain single. And I wonder if that's to encourage those relationships with the fans, to make them idolized more. And do you have a take on that? Am I seeing it wrong, or?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, the personal lives of stars, especially in Korea. Celebrities in Korean society seem to have always been held to some arbitrary higher pedestal. They're always a subject of public scrutiny. It's like people have too much time on their hands and really care about what the celebrities are doing on their free time, right?
Right.
Sometimes I read comments and malicious online comments, and I think maybe they stem from some sort of either an inferiority complex, or they just want to release emotions living in a tough like life society. As to the relationships or the sex life, I think it's interesting how in Korean society, people often say, for when we're referring to like open-minded progressive viewpoints, people say, oh, it's like very American or Hollywood style. But, you know, what does that really mean? Like, you're equating America with progressive, but what exactly, you know, are we trying to say here? I think we look at English comments for a K-pop idol dating. The comments are usually supportive. They say, oh, like good for them, hope they're happy, versus Korean comments are like, oh, like I'm gonna leave the fandom, or they're not being transparent with us. I think so. At that point, I think there's a lot of mudslinging across both sides of the fandom usually when something like that happens. At that point, I think that's when you start to realize there's like a larger cultural difference in how people view celebrities and these like engage with these parasocial relationships. Is there a right? I don't think there's a right answer, but it's just that how fans of different cultures engage with their artists and idols that they look up to.
And they come from different cultural backgrounds. They have different expectations. you know, and there are different values in these cultures. What about these fans then? Obviously, Wooseok, K-pop fans are not monolith. There's not just one K-pop fan, right? They're as varied as they are anything. From my experience, like I write a column every week, and my wife will see the headline of my column, and if it's politics, if I'm writing about the president or something like that, she's like, if it's K-pop, she looks at me and she goes, "Be careful." There is this feeling. I think, I don't think I'm making this up, but you know,
Absolutely.
What's your take on this? The fans are really passionate, and there's a lot of love, and there's so much support, and there's also this kind of very, you know, thing you have to tread carefully through.
Yeah, I agree. Even I was also worried when I was writing this book. I realized that what if I said something kind of iffy in there that was like misinterpreted by like a specific fandom.
Yeah.
And I get the next thing I know, I don't know what's going on. I don't know what they're gonna do, right? So I was very cautious when I was writing the book, and I had those same thoughts as you when I was writing it. One thing is that obviously there's this, like, personally, I also had that fear of malicious commenting or doxing and whatnot. I don't know if how this would really answer the question, but how I compare like this K-pop fan experience, being a K-pop fan myself, but I'm also a fan of the UFC, mixed martial arts, and that also invites like a diverse array of people that a lot of comments are absolutely terrible and stupid. But a lot of the differences I realized though across this mixed martial arts fandom and K-pop fandom is that people fight and get into stupid arguments and mudsling against each other, but most people leave it there. They don't bring it back up on another discussion. I did one time. I commented like on a UFC post. I guess a lot of people disagree with it. I got a DM from I got a DM on Twitter saying someone was calling me stupid, and they proceeded to block me right after. I looked the account up, and it was a 15-year-old girl. She even had a YouTube channel like link where she like sings videos and stuff. But she called me stupid because of my UFC comment. But I think that at least in the K-pop context, what I noticed is that a lot of fans keep receipts, and sometimes there is a little bit of targeting specific people, which I think is a practice that really should not be supported at all. But at the same time, this is why I think Twitter is sometimes it's an echo chamber, sometimes it's very toxic, but that's the nature of the social media era we live in today. We can't police everything that goes within a fandom just because there's so many diverse people under one fandom, and we can't compare different fandoms either because, you know, there's people all over the world using this one very platform to interact with each other. I think my goal is to really help destigmatize this idea of being a K-pop fan, though, because there's still this idea that, you know, obviously this like K-pop fans are teenage fangirls, but do I look like I'm a, you know, straight heterosexual Korean male, you know, going to Twice concerts, you know, liking BTS and EXO. So, you know, hey, like this can be cool. Like you don't have to, we're all very different people with different viewpoints. Obviously not everyone's going to agree, and some people are actually toxic, but that's the nature. That's why, you know, we're on social media, right?
Sure. No, I agree with you. And when you talk about these social media platforms in your book, you break it down and you're sort of like, you say, you know, Facebook is for the boomers. There's not much K-pop on Facebook, but it's more predominantly, you know, YouTube for the content and Twitter for the conversations. Do you see any of those kind of changes? Is it going on as we get into like Weverses and as it goes forward? Is it changing on TikTok? What's the relationship, I want to ask, Wooseok, between K-pop and social media and particular platforms?
I think so. K-pop's growth is so connected with the social media platforms that, to the extent, I wonder, there's definitely some groups that would have benefited from this current boom of social media, because even when we look at just like 10 years ago, obviously Gangnam Style took off on YouTube, but what if 2012 to 2014 era, what if like Instagram was a thing back then? What if Twitter was like an even bigger platform it is like now? Because a lot of this fandom activity happens on social media because it's so easy for people, like-minded people, to gather together and share opinions with each other. And also when we talk about thinking about visual media such as YouTube and TikTok, the thing that TikTok does really well is obviously it has the commenting component that Instagram or Twitter has as well, but also has that when the background music, when music trends on Twitter, it trends on Spotify and everywhere else. So that actually leads to a lot of K-pop going viral. People make K-pop cover videos, like do the dance covers and stuff. So we're seeing an era where not it's just not about commenting on we have like the written component and also the visual component, the fandom experiences, which I think is great. That's now this is the other end of the triangle. This is the fandom and the culture. The culture now is synonymous with is actually being shaped by social media platforms, and it's just gonna grow even bigger from here. Where's next? I don't know. Maybe we're all going into Metaverse or something. But that's the beauty. We didn't think TikTok would take off this much until the pandemic happened and everyone got on it. So
Metaverse graphics look terrible to me, Wooseok. I don't know they're going to develop. It just looks like, man, what is this? It looks terrible. I'm not a fan. Maybe it'll change.
I agree.
What about this dance? You're a dancer. You were a dancer. You are a dancer, Wooseok.
Funny you mentioned that. I guess I am a dancer. I'll have to actually dance for a wedding soon. We're gonna get the boys back for a wedding sometime. But yeah, dance is a pretty big part of my life, whether I watch it or perform. So
who's got the best moves in K-pop? Who's got the worst moves? Tell me about dancing through the lens of K-pop, either in the current age or when you were growing up. Who really cuts a rug?
How I started dancing was I started watching. Obviously, it kind of is involved with how I started getting involved with K-pop, or like started consuming K-pop back in middle school, and I started seeing videos of TVXQ, 동방신기, which remains to this day my favorite group, because they don't like the 5-member iteration. Unfortunately, does not exist anymore. But I was looking at these guys. I'm like, they're doing this choreography and still singing live. And I'm like, how are they doing this? So I'm in my room trying these dance moves out. I was a very shy, introverted kid at the time. And then somehow I spiral into, that's how I started learning about other K-pop groups as well. Somehow I was learning about HOT and Shinhwa, going back to Seotaeji, and then now fast forward, I was doing dance coverage and stuff. Eventually I moved back to Seoul. So this whole time I was in New Jersey in America, but I moved back to Seoul for high school. And now when we go to Seoul, there's dance hagwons, surprisingly. And my mom was actually progressive enough to let me enroll in a dance hagwon while also doing SAT, prep as well. So that's something I really enjoyed. I enjoyed going to these classes, learning the choreography of different like K-pop stars like Rain. And I was like, wow, like me doing the choreography, like first of all, I feel energized. I feel like I'm a star.
Yeah.
And then I realized dance is such a crucial part of K-pop that a lot of these idols that train all these hours, they're actually legitimate dancers. They can hang with like the best in the world.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. The dancing is incredible. And, when you compare it, today's dancing to, you mentioned some older groups there, Shinhwa, TVXQ and things like that. They were great at the time, but it seems like the bar is always being raised in this dancing, this performance, this choreography. It's all got to come together. Do you see that? Like, is the bar in K-pop being raised not only in terms of aesthetics, in terms of success, but also in terms of that whole package? Is it evolving?
I think it's definitely evolving. The skill level is getting higher and higher. I mean, obviously that's not to discredit the artists of past generations as well, but it's a different time. Now we have YouTube, we have Zoom, we have all these like tools that we can create something. So we can a lot more tools at our arsenal to create magic. In terms of the choreography, I think one thing that's changed over the years is obviously getting international choreographers. You fly them out either to Korea or they send you a video clip over email or Zoom. And the choreographers in Korea also take the video and they can also modify it a little bit. But that's a lot of art being created in the process. And I think with this, I think the silver lining of the pandemic, if we had to pick it out, is this whole Zoom remote situation. We can transmit so much content and information and also art over this remotely. So going back to the dance discussion, yes, I think if we look at the dance choreography of current boy bands, they're very intricate, and now they also all sing live or have to like maintain a certain standard of performance that I think is good to see. I think performances are perfect, but at the same time, I hope they can at least breathe and chill a little bit in between these performances, because some of these dances are wild, I think.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think when it is raising the bar, we see how far it will go. When you talk about creating art and things like that, and the digital nature of Zoom, like these NFTs and things like that, that's where Hybe seems to be going, pushing these forward. The other entertainment agencies are on it as well. I must admit, I don't know much about NFTs. Maybe I'm old. Like I don't get it. But I've got some artist friends who make them, and they seem to be making bank from them. But then
Yeah.
I get like, can't I just right click and save this thing? What's going on? Copy paste, right? So, what do you make about K-pop delving into the world of NFTs, metaverses, getting there? Because there seems to be some kind of the fans. Some are on board, some are not.
Yeah.
How's that going?
I think, first of all, I did think this was inevitable when the concept of NFT is diversifying the IP and content. And in a similar way, they've been doing this with merchandise. So say like, you buy a limited edition album and it gives you an exclusive photo card that no one else has. It's one of a kind. So that idea is somewhat parallel to this concept, but there's a lot more layers to this. Obviously, fans are annoyed about the environmental concerns, especially if the artists were ambassadors for environmental organizations, and now there's something contradictory about the company pushing something that's detrimental. I don't think there's any way around that. To be honest, companies can say it will use eco-friendly blockchain solutions, but let's be real, right? Also, another thing is that all the major companies are diving into the NFT and metaverse content. They're making partnerships with blockchain platforms. So SM and YG are partnering with Binance, which is not Binance, and JYP and Hive are partnering with Dunamu, which is a domestic company. Hive is basically diversifying their IP strategy by creating this blockchain crypto exchange with Dunamu. And why we don't know for certain what kind of NFTs are going to come out of this. Obviously, the people at the company know way better than we do. But I think we just have to hold on tight. And the thing about NFTs is that no one is forcing you to buy NFTs. They're just going to, I think how I see this is that they're just going to have it. They're just going to have it as a form of some sort of like IP that you can consume, and supply and demand. I'm sure someone will come forward and invest in them. Now, there's a video I saw actually a couple of weeks ago, posted by a channel called K-hiphop. It's a channel under Gaon Chart, the organization that aggregates all the streaming, all the digital sales in Korea. So it's a pretty legitimate lecture that dissects this relationship, why fans are annoyed. To simplify, or how I see this kind of, is that we already have an established social structure between the fandom, the company, and the artist in the triangle. In comes this other new medium called NFTs, and which has the potential to invite a bunch of people that are not part of this community in, and just kind of invade this fandom space. Let's say a bunch of people that want to invest in this rare NFT, K-pop NFT project come in, they swoop all the NFTs and take all the benefits associated with it. That really disturbs the fandom experience for a lot of people, including myself. If I saw someone that really doesn't care for the artist, they only care about investing in the NFT because it looks cool or they see it as a long-term value, I do think that my experience I would be a little bit annoyed. At the same time, I do think the longer this goes, there will be people who will eventually learn about it. Kind of like how a couple of years ago, Bitcoin was a term that people like, what's Bitcoin? And now at least like it's kind of becoming an everyday term now.
Yep. Yeah.
We see artists, like some artists have already launched their NFT collections on the Korean, it's called the blockchain platforms called Clayton. So artists like Seonmi, Seven, Brave Girls, so they're a little bit older artists. Like the age demographic of these artists are a little bit older. Seonmi is also a veteran. So she has a little bit more leeway to freely pursue these new projects. So I went on the Discord for Seonmi's NFT project. It's called Seonmi Club. And fans are very passionate about it. They think it's very cool. And I think, and seeing these fans' enthusiasm makes me think that, hey, like, this is art and the artist really wants to promote it. Now, I know that there was also backlash towards Seonmi's project, and rightfully so. People are still very divided on this issue. Whether they'll continue to stay divided, probably, possibly, but I think this is something we just got to wait and see. What kind of NFT projects are they going to drop? And is this really a hype, or is this just a bubble that's going to burst at some point? My take is that, so my main hustle is I'm a lawyer, and I've been analyzing a lot of like blockchain NFT trends and stuff like that. And my perspective towards this whole K-pop NFT situation is that I can't say that I necessarily like everything that's going on, but I do think it's inevitable, and that's why I think it's worth at least learning about what is about to happen.
Do you think it's important that the K-pop fans have agency over the NFTs or these changes themselves? So rather than outside actors, seeing K-pop as a source of income or generating profits, but and then encroaching on that territory, like you said, but rather that the fans themselves. Because when I think of the fans, Wooseok, like, and try to understand them, the amount of dedication and work they do with like this streaming and things like that, they feel part of the group's success, and they are genuinely part of the group's success because they're going like out of their way to do all this support. Can the fans have agency over those developments, NFTs, and technological changes?
Mm-hmm. So why the NFT space is especially booming, especially in the Indian hip hop artist space, because there, obviously, the company system isn't so rigid and artists have a little bit more leeway to connect with their fans. And they see NFTs as a way to build a fandom community. So let's say a fan buys a very exclusive NFT drop by a rapper. And then the NFT, the more NFTs you have, if you have a certain amount, maybe like it grants you a certain amount of like limited edition tickets or VIP access, or even maybe you can get like dinner with the rapper. That was actually one of the perks as on the Seonmi's crypto project, NFT project. One of the perks actually, once you unlock it, was like actually like you get to meet Seonmi. So in the West, at least, artists like Diplo, Nas, EDM DJs have been engaging in projects like this and building up this like focused community based on NFTs. Korea, rapper Justthis, who's one of the hottest rappers right now, has engaged in NFT projects. Korea is not as widespread amongst the Korean hip hop culture yet, but I do think like this presents a way for indie and hip hop artists, especially those who may not have who may not be signed to a label or something. They can connect directly with the fans, and the fans can monetarily support the artist directly. And I think that's the value of music NFTs, or that's the value of music NFTs that a lot of people seem to support, at least in this space for now.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, because it's like just a development of the fan club or something like that, or a Patreon or a GoFundMe. But it works in two ways. You're giving money to people you want to support, but getting something back in return. In that sense, it seems to make sense. When you talk a lot about Korean hip hop and things like that, and so I wonder, and I'm not sure on this, so I'd like your take on it, Wooseok. Does the success of K-pop, which is genuine, and does the success of K-pop drown out the possibility of other Korean music and genres reaching that? Because in Korea, it's not all about K-pop. There's a lot of other great music going on. But does the success of K-pop sort of hinder the rise of other ones, or can they all rise at the same time?
I would definitely love to see it happen. And I think it's interesting when some K-pop fans realize that Korean mainstream public, or like the GP, general public, a lot of the general public doesn't listen to K-pop on a daily basis, nor do they really care. Or K-pop, for a lot of people, for a lot of Koreans, it's there. It's always been there. So you can choose to engage with it. You don't have to, because there's a lot of great other music as well in addition to K-pop. I would love to see just a diversity of artists and Korean artists celebrated worldwide. I think it doesn't have to be limited to like idols and whatnot. We already have artists collaborating across borders and countries all the time, like Eric Nam, Dean, Crush. Those are actually names that are being tossed around by a lot of international fans as well. Especially based out in LA, we have 88 Rising that is uplifting Asian American artists, and they do partnerships with a lot of Korean artists. Like Chung Ha did something collaborated with 88 Rising, and so now today I think there's a lot more leeway. So there's a lot more opportunity to collaborate, and this doesn't have to be restricted to this traditional idol or company system that we had in Korea for a while. And I think we really have to credit this to the spread and development of social media technology, because now fans can demand, hey, like, we need to see this collab happen now. If a lot of people retweet it or post the same thing, obviously the artist may see it. Artists may actually reach out to the supposed collaboration partner directly. Hey, let's do something, and that's how collaborations are born sometimes. And that's like we see crossovers that we may never have seen 10 years ago because of some sort of logistic or some sort of like lost in communication thing. Now that people can communicate directly with each other thanks to social media, we can see much more creativity and what I like to call just magic happen.
Yeah, man. So if we're talking about collabs, we're talking about hip hop and K-pop, I have to ask you, BTS and Snoop Dogg. I mean, like, I grew up listening to Snoop Dogg. I'm a white guy from the south of England. Of course, I grew up listening to Snoop Dogg. You know, but what do we make of this? I mean, they're collabing with Coldplay and Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
These are artists that were popular like when I was at high school. Man. What do you make of this one with Snoop Dogg? What's it going to be?
Snoop Dogg. Well, first of all, I find it amazing how Snoop Dogg is so still relevant in pop culture after all this time. And I think it goes to Snoop Dogg. I think obviously this collaboration I'm looking forward to, because I don't know what kind of sound they're probably planning on doing. I don't know if it's a hip hop based sound or a little bit more on the poppier. But Snoop Dogg, the way he's also collaborated with Psy a couple of years back on a song called Hangover. Yeah. And the way he continues to reinvent himself, and he's also very invested into the NFT space as well. He continues to keep it very fresh for the newer, younger audience as well, because he's kind of like an OG. And then he comes on at the Super Bowl halftime show, and people are still going crazy for Snoop Dogg and Eminem and Dr. Dre. So I think some artists of that caliber, I think, continue to, they're just timeless, I think. And I hope to see, now since we're on the topic of K-pop, hopefully like we can a couple of decades time, we'll talk about, Korean K-pop artists and, of that caliber as well. Yeah.
Who do you think? Do you have any idea what's going to last the test of time? It was recently like Seotaeji's 30-year anniversary. I got told, I don't know if but on the radio shows that I do, we're not allowed to play any Seotaeji songs. Like, there's all this weird stuff going on, right?
Oh, yeah. Seotaeji, well, it's always been like, I guess like that's the price of being an icon, all these rules around you. And
yeah. Who's going to last?
Yeah. I have no idea. But the way I think Seotaeji, like, I think that's the thing about icons. We still talk about Seotaeji after all these years, and it's just that, and he doesn't release music very frequently either. But same with Seotaeji. If we go back, like Cho Young Pil had an album. I remember when I was a freshman in college in 2013, and I was very anticipating it because
Bounce or something, or Hello.
Yes, yeah. Bounce came out first, and I was like, this is actually very trendy. How does he manage to do this? And then I think the song called Hello came out after it, featured a rapper named Verbal Gent, who was like pretty hot at the time.
Yeah.
And to me, this was like, wow, this is like I don't know how old he was, like 60 or something. And I was like, some musicians, I think, probably continue to test themselves, experiment with different sounds. And because you probably know that obviously you have a fandom that grows old with you. But obviously, you also want to bring in the new masses, the newer generation as well. And I think that's probably like some sort of challenge for artists that continue to make music into their older years.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder, on that subject, Wooseok, I wonder whether Hallyu will continue. As of course it will continue, but I mean in terms of its success, because if you look back at the rise of Hong Kong films, that was huge. Then you had Japanese with its manga, with its Nintendo, everything. Now it's on Korea. So is this like kind of a cyclical thing which will go around, or do you think that this Hallyu international success where it is right now, because it's crushing it, can that keep going?
And that's also the question. When I was researching for this book and talking with experts, I asked Professor Lee, hey, what do you think is going to happen next? And everyone had a different answer. But I think no one could pinpoint accurately to exactly what's going to happen, obviously, right? But personally, I think, well, one thing in the near future, obviously, one thing hinges on BTS and HYBE. Whether we like it or not, they have the military service. I've never seen BTS live, so I kind of do realize that once they go off to military, my time is kind of running out. But there's one factor like that. But I think one other thing that comes to mind is that we saw with content like Squid Game, I don't think anyone really anticipated Squid Game to take off in that kind of caliber. Obviously, the show was very entertaining, but to see everyone dressed in America on Halloween like that, it was just like unfathomable.
Yeah.
So with good pop cultural content that Korea continues to invest and produce, maybe we can expect more of these phenomena to happen. We can see more like global scale Squid Game, BTS. Now, when we talk about like up and comers and rookies, what could we expect from them? I think it was a lot easier to predict in the past generations when the world wasn't moving as fast. But now because technology is progressing so rapidly, and as we mentioned before, the bars are being raised so high. So I think we got to continue to up each other. So we don't know. I think we've been also having less of this like passing of the torch moments. I consider like like let's say Seotaeji and boys disbands, and then HOT comes out, kind of thing. Big Bang goes on hiatus, and then now BTS is a worldwide icon. Not that any of that stuff is related, but I think we did see like like Seotaeji, G-Dragon, BTS, kind of like different generations of people. I can't really fathom what is going to happen next, but I think that is also when I discuss with fans of different artists, that is like something very interesting to see, because none of us really know what's going to happen, but that's why I'm just trying to enjoy this as much as possible, right?
The torch does need to be passed. I think it's really important, that we need to always allow the next generation to have their voice, their sound, their music. It's so important. You mentioned Big Bang there. They're coming back, right? That's coming soon.
Yeah.
Are you hyped? Are you scared? Like thoughts on that? Should they be allowed to come back? I know there's even conversations conversations around that. I mean, G-Dragon was like, he was
that was a
huge man though.
Icon,
tell me about Big Bang's comeback, Wooseok.
And I think it's interesting because, well, at least most people around me are pretty hyped for it. I think one reason is that at least I'm a millennial, but we grew up with Big Bang since middle school. A lot of people if I go to karaoke with people of my age demographic, we still sing Big Bang songs because it is something that still gets the people going. So it's interesting. I think we grew up with artists and we grow old with them, and sometimes we forget about them and go on a binge one day. I'm like, oh, like those kind of remind me back of high school. And now you see like an artist like making a comeback like after a long time. So obviously I have every reason to be hyped. I think it will be a little bit different than what we've been hearing this whole time. But that's because the artists also get older. Artists probably have different musical, not philosophies. They've been through a lot of other personal things, right? If that translates into good music, then obviously we as fans and consumers have every right to enjoy and consume it as much as possible.
Yeah. No, I'm looking forward to it. I want to see where they are now, because I think it's hard to sometimes in the modern age we live so much in the present that we lose a little bit of that historical perspective. And I think the impact that Big Bang were having at the time, what G-Dragon was doing with his sounds production, his like aesthetic, his gender bending, the man was out there.
And was, I think, really in the amount of influence he had over the upcoming K-pop groups and also in the hip-hop scene as well. I thought, and I think when I was in high school, G-Dragon, when he first launched his solo career with Heartbreaker, he was getting a lot of hate from all sides. But I think that's where when an artist succeeds, you win over the people over time with your music and your presence. And now, people are like, what's G-Dragon doing? Like, he's been back from the military. Like, why is he got to give us new music? So I think that's how you continue to be, remembered by the people. And I think that's something like, if I was a creative, that's, I think, what would motivate me to continue doing more.
Yeah. And I think the really influential people do get hate. Like Seotaeji got hate when he started doing G-Dragon. I mean, that's what you do. You've got to make people, I've always loved this, music should, I've forgotten the expression now because I haven't looked at it for so long. Music should disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed. Love that. And that's what it does, right? You've got to make things uncomfortable. Just very quickly about this military service, right? That's mental, isn't it? That you have these, like, G-Dragon has to go and do military service. You get these big stars, maybe BTS has to go and do it. Like, does there need to be change in that, or is it like national duty? These stars should do it. Will that hinder K-pop? Is there a way around it?
Okay, well, first of all, as a Korean American, I guess my opinions are, obviously not like I think I have limited say on this matter, but at the same time, from a fan's perspective, obviously I don't want BTS to go. I think they have all the momentum in the world right now. I want to see them continue to reach new heights, but at the same time, I do see why there's a debate over. I look at Instagram comments about this, them like passing a bill about extending the age, or like, should we just waive it altogether? Objectively, if we're talking about like how much money they're bringing into the country, a lot of, commerce is booming because of BTS. There's actually, we can make arguments for it, but obviously, it's the law. People can make policy arguments all day. So I don't want to like opine too much into it, but well, who knows? Like maybe we'll have some sort of like entertainer specific legislation at some point maybe they can perform maybe they'll like allow them to like perform during the service, like, you know, fly out to the Grammys again or something like that. That would be pretty cool. Or allow them to, you know, still engage with some sort of, you know, creative projects of BTS's caliber. And that's only possible because BTS is BTS. But who knows, right? I personally, I would say never say never though.
It's a difficult one to opine on, isn't it? Because it's so
Yeah,
divided.
now it's like,
yeah, put you on the spot. But you also want societies like where rules are equal for everybody. You know, you want that kind of thing. And
right.
I think that, you know, understanding the realities of Korean society, culture, and life of what's going on makes the rise of K-pop all that more, you know, amazing to see how this country, this society has produced that. Just a couple more for you before I let you go, because I know you're on time. You write a lot about reports on K-pop that, you know, go on otherness and producing stigma and, you know, the bad reporting on K-pop, and you try to look for accurate representation. And how can that be done better? You know, what can change? What would you like to see improve the narrative, the reporting on K-pop?
I think it's been getting a little bit better in the recent couple of years because we have fans that are now knowledgeable and vocal, especially on social media, and they call out reporters all across social media platforms when they say something that, you know, really honestly is offensive to someone. You know, let's say as an Asian artist came over from Asia to do an interview in the US, and they'll be like, oh, like what does it feel like finally being famous? And no, they've been famous, you just didn't know about it. But it is I do see why this Western centric gaze and this sort of you know, exoticizing, you know, other people, it continues. But I think that's, you know, that's why I try to do my job. That's why I wrote this book and brought up these topics and try to continue to speak out against this kind of thing. We had that thing recently with Squid Game as well, because the actors weren't really known outside of Korea. I mean, which is objectively maybe, but there's a way you can phrase these things and not, you know, make it sound like these talent and creatives have not been around or elsewhere. They're already like top stars in Korea and Asia. So same with like when BTS first had to encounter all these struggles with these like sort of questions. Hopefully we'll see better journalists who are genuinely passionate about K-pop. I think when you're genuinely like the subject you're writing about, I think you put a lot more effort into it. And I think hopefully we'll see a lot of diversity of journalists as well. Interestingly, I don't think there's a lot of English-speaking Korean voices on the Western side writing about this. I personally am not in journalism, so I don't do that kind of work. But I would, you know, like to actually, you know, see more Koreans in that space, because I think K-pop was made also possible not just because of people in the industry, but also people outside of it. So if we have, you know, more, you know, diversity of different voices that understand what's going on and see the, you know, pluses and minuses and think they can you know, explain them well. Hopefully, you know, this cultural phenomenon can continue on in a manner that we can all support and get behind by.
I dig those vibes. Do you notice a difference between Korean language and English language reporting on it? Because I really like your book because you're pulling on both sources. It's not just Korean, it's not just Western, but you know, you've got a foot in both, and it's really good for that, Wooseok. Is there a difference or different narratives, ideas, or are they similar?
By similar, so I think reporting on K-pop, there's actually not that many Western journalists I realized that report on K-pop, whereas like in Korean media, K-pop is just one segment of entertainment, so like it's always on the news. I think what I tried to do was I wanted to provide the Korean sources, because for me, I think at least a lot of this gets lost in translation, not because of the translator's fault, but there's just like cultural nuances that just don't get translated over. And for me, as a native Korean speaker, I wanted to, at least like whoever's reading the book, I wanted to provide the sources and say, hey, like this is directly from a Korean news or a Korean like academic paper or like some sort of statistics. And maybe like you see like this stuff has been going on, like academic research in Korea has been going on for a while, same with you know, elsewhere internationally. But I think we need to do a lot more like cross-cultural research and collaboration, not just, you know, not just in the music space, but also in, you know, journalism. And also I know that's being done in the academic sphere as well. So
Yeah, no, it's a really good book, Wooseok. I've read a lot of books on K-pop and academic papers, and some of them are really hard to just to understand what the people are saying. Your book is great because it lays it all out. It's well researched,
yeah.
but it's you know, I don't say that lightly, and I think even before I was speaking to you, I shared it on social media and said this is, you know.
Really grateful for that. Thank you so much. Yeah.
It's a good book. I did it because I meant it. Wooseok, you're a busy man, so I know you have to go. So last question for you, sir. It's a question I've asked everyone thus far.
Yeah.
We're all in this world together. What can we do to make our lives more meaningful, Wooseok? How can we help others? What's the meaning of life?
Damn. But okay. Well, and what a big question to end, right? But okay, how I would tackle this question. What I like to prioritize in my life is finding my own passion and flame. Like what drives me to get up in the morning. Nowadays, like sometimes, it's hard to get up in the morning sometimes, but finding that little passion, what gets me going in my brain to keep turning on. Eventually, I think it's all connected because once I find my drive and desire, I work hard towards it. I end up, and somehow I realize that I end up inspiring people around me and people that I don't know. And I think when I wrote this book, I wrote it because I genuinely like K-pop. I genuinely love it. I like dancing. I like listening to the music. And I wanted to provide some sort of source. Hey, like, you know, it's my passion project, but here's a resource like for K-pop. Let's just make one more print resource. And I got the messages from people I don't even know, say like, hey, like, I don't know much about K-pop, but I think you writing this book, you know, inspired me to do something creative or pursue a project. Seeing that, you know, you already have your main, you know, job as a lawyer. So, and I look to people that have similar, I think, interests and, you know, vibes as me, that they have, you know, they can get their main hustle going. And just like you too, you have your side, you know, podcast. And I think I've always looked up to people that can, you know, keep in balance, like multiple aspects of their lives. So, and in turn, I get to pay that forward. And hopefully I get to inspire people, you know, that around me and also that don't know me. And that's why I've been trying to connect with a lot of people as much as possible nowadays. I'm a full out extrovert now. Some people find that hard to believe. Back when I was like a shy guy in middle high school, but you know, that's, I guess, my take on this grand final question.
We're going to see any dance uploads on your Insta or TikTok or Twitter then soon? Are you that extrovert?
You know, I thought, seriously contemplated the whole TikTok thing. I do think like there will come a time when I create a persona for this TikTok. Hopefully it might be K-pop related, but I think that's something we'll have to juggle. We have to just let it go and adopt something, but time will come, time will tell, right? So
I'm too old for TikTok. I'll leave that to you.
You can do it.
Nobody wants to see me on there. Wooseok, it's been great. Thank you for everything.
Thank you for having me on the show.
Thanks.